So I've already started working on putting some of this gearbox back together. I got brand new bearings in both sides. I've installed a couple of the shafts already, or all three of the shafts, I guess, in one side, and then all the gearing. So that should be pretty much ready to go. Otherwise, for this, all I'm doing now is essentially waiting on the actual cutter head, and we should be able to get this thing put back together the rest of the way. All right, so this is kind of the interesting side of the gearbox so far, and that is the side with all the gears. So there's 3 bearings under each of these, and I don't want to take this one off because there's a little spring with a ball in there, which is actually a little bit annoying to get in, but there's a little yoke here that goes all the way through, and then you can kind of see this top one also has a shaft that comes through, so this is actually what gets driven, whether it's through the pulley or the gear. I'm pretty sure this is a gear from or a sprocket from the chain. And then this shaft here, there's a little ball end that goes on it, and what you do is you can use that for basically engaging and disengaging. And you're supposed to do this while it's running because these are helical gears, so obviously they won't mesh unless they're spinning. Very well anyway. And so when you push that lever up, it will push this whole gear up and disengage everything. That's actually way too far. It only goes up to about there. That's where the bearing seats. So then now you can see that this will freewheel. So essentially, if for whatever reason you needed to stop the machine, say like, I don't know, if you saw a chunk of metal that was coming into it or something, or if you were just taking off way too much, or who knows. I've never personally needed to stop my planer partway through, but hey, if you need to, this is how you would do it. So then the other part of it is there's a gasket. I did peel off the old one. It almost looked like it was gasket maker rather than gasket and gasket sealer, but I ordered some just regular kind of synthetic paper gasket material that was good for oil, as well as gasket sealer for both sides of it. But then I actually went to Grizzly, and they still have some planers that are very similar to this one, and so I just decided to pick up one of their gaskets, and it says I shouldn't need to seal either side of it. It's kind of a much more of a rubber, so I'm hoping that that'll just work. So that's what I'm going to go with for now. If it doesn't work, well, I guess we'll end up back in it and replacing it with a different gasket with gasket sealer. Who knows? Maybe I'll end up using the gasket sealer eventually. But basically, flip that in there. There's going to be 2 bearings. There's a third bearing. This is the bearing here that I can't install yet. Or I guess I could install the bearing, but I also have to install the cutter head, and I'm getting a new cutter head, and it's coming with the bearings, so I don't have the bearing yet. I have to put it in here, and then I can put this one in, and there's a little washer with a screw that holds this one in place. And then I'll be able to put this thing back together. But for now, it's about all I can do. Alright, so this is the other side of the gear housing, and I've got the replacement bearing in here. There's a little washer and a socket cap screw that will hold that in its place. And then on the opposite side, I have the new oil seal put in place. And it needed a new one because I got a new cutter head in, finally. So, new cutter head for it. It's a helical head, and it actually has a smaller shaft on the end of it, diameter, than what the original had. So it required a new oil seal, which came with that, as well as the bearings. So that's actually why I ended up not being able to install that bearing until I got the cutter head in, because it came with it. Alright, next thing will be to actually install the cutter head. Is this a little bit janky? Oh, heck yeah. It's not held in there very tight, but the way I have the clamp set up, the jaws are obviously a lot wider on the back than the front, so it kind of holds it back just against the workbench. And it's got one of the boards that it shipped with, along with a pine board underneath it, and the gearbox goes onto this end of the shaft, so I will be able to kind of drive that home since I don't really have any better, quote-unquote, better way of holding it. And then this little block I cut a little notch out of, and that's for seating the bearing, and that's just so I can get over that little washer that secures it in place. Okay, so as you can see, the bearing is down, or I should say the shaft is all the way seated, and there's kind of that cutout there, and that matches the bottom of this. So we just install that on there. So that goes there, and then we run the screw in down through that end of the cutter head. Hold up. So yeah, this part right here, a little bit glossed over that, but it's actually not quite as simple as that, just reinstalling it. It would be on the Delta. I know from at least one person that installed the same cutter head on the Delta that this does in fact fit just fine. But the problem that I ran into is that it's actually a little bit narrower here on my cutter head. So right here, it's a little bit narrower. And that was a problem. So I actually had to file mine a little bit wider. This was an attempt from buying one from Grizzly that didn't quite work out because the right number of splines, wrong direction. So anyway, what I had to do is I just took a file and opened these up. I counted my strokes to make sure that I was taking off about the same on each side, using digital calipers to make sure that these were the same thickness, and then just kind of kept going until they fit. And then I could put it right in there where it belonged, and then I was good to go. So just a heads up, at least for the, whatever this one is, Total Shop, that's the one. I know what I have. For the Total Shop one, this piece just kind of needs to get modified a little bit. The Deltas, like I said, should be fine, so that might be something that you have to check, but it's a super, super easy fix. So anyway, that's what I had to do for that. And so I have this set of gears is already in place, and then I've got the one on the end of the cutter shaft, or the shaft of the cutter head, and then I've got bearings installed in these, and I will put the front half of it on. So hopefully we'll be able to get that to seat. Got the bearings pre-installed where they need to be, and some of the other parts already in there. So let's see if we can get it on there. All right, that was seemingly pretty easy. Seems like everything is in place for that now. And then there's just a handful of socket cap screws that will don't put in the locating pin, that won't work. 5 of them that will hold this all in place. And I'm just making sure that with this engaged, as I'm spinning the cutter head, this shaft is slowly turning, but it's turning. And that's exactly what I need. So I'll push that back in and it'll be disengaged. Also purchased from Grizzly, because mine was all banged up, a new knob that will go on the end of that. And then I've got 4 more socket cap screws that will attach to the top here through the main casting. Okay, so one thing with the casting on this gearbox here, the thing is that the screws that actually mount it into the main casting that come in from the top, on mine at least, those are actually drilled all the way through. So if you wanted to, you could use that same little bit of tubing and then fill through that instead. Might not be a bad idea because this is kind of a little bit of a pain in the butt. However, I'm not exactly sure if it'll work because I never tried it. So you'll probably have to leave the plug out and then, you know, fill from the top, wait till it comes out the side, still make the same amount of mess. might just be a little bit easier. The alternative is it might not be a bad idea to just go ahead and fill that before you install the gearbox, because that'd probably be a lot easier too. But you just kind of got to make sure that to get the level right, you kind of have it sitting level and then upright, so then you can fill it. It'll get up to the level of that plug for the fill side, and then you're done. So that might be a little bit easier. I did not go that route, but oh well.